The Baltimore Ravens picked up a big Week 12 win over the Los Angeles Chargers, but that didn't stop Lamar Jackson from challenging his offense to be better and calling them out on things they need to improve. We talk about that. Khalil Mack taking some crazy shots at Derrick Henry and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available on podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast, bringing you daily Ravens coverage each and every single day, news, analysis, updates. So appreciate everybody for being here, and be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member that we also have them covered if they would like daily Ravens coverage as well. Today's Victory Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. 30-23, Ravens defeat the Los Angeles Chargers. They get back in the win column. Big bounce back game for the Ravens. We talked about that on the live after the game, which again, we do go live after every Ravens game, but it was a big, I'd say, momentum get back game. I think everybody was feeling kind of down after that Pittsburgh game, and really we're wondering, okay, well, who is this Ravens team? They're going to be able to bounce back in a way that they need to, or is this going to be their fifth AFC loss through 12 weeks? And they got the job done. Offensively, really was a Derrick Henry show with some greatness of Lamar Jackson sprinkled in there as well. Obviously, he made his fair share of plays. Defensively, I think slow start all around for both the offense and the defense, but I was proud personally of how the defense stepped up to the plate, especially without one of their leaders in Roquan Smith. So we're going to talk about a lot today. In the final segment, we'll do a general Ravens and Chargers game recap, much like we did in the live show after the fact. But we have a couple of things to dive into in the first and second parts of the show. First of all, again, the offense put up 30 points. Derrick Henry did his thing, but Lamar Jackson still called out the group and challenged them to be better after the game because there are still some things that they can work on. So we'll talk about what he had to say in the first part of the show. Then in the second part of the show, Khalil Mack took some crazy shots at Derrick Henry and honestly the Ravens after the game. So we have to talk about what those were because kind of out of the blue. So we'll talk about all of that coming up. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson and what he had to say. He was very complimentary for the most part. Talked about his touchdown with Rashad Bateman. Clearly it meant a lot for him to get a win for John Harbaugh against his brother Jim. And again, me being an older brother, the older brother always wins. And in the Harbaugh, that does ring true as John is 3-0 over Jim. But he talked about Derrick Henry, talked about how big it is to have him in the offense and getting him going, this, that, and the other. Talked about that fourth down play, which we'll dive into. But he talked a lot about just them being horrible starting the game. That's a quote. He said they're horrible starting the game. And Lamar said, quote, "We have to get back in the groove of starting our games off the correct way. And then just as the games get going on, getting stronger and stronger and finishing how we're supposed to. At the beginning of the season, we were doing a great job at that. And then as the season went on, and as the season is going on, some way, somehow, we've just been horrible starting the game. But as the game is going on, we're getting better. But we have to find a way to balance that out. Be good from the beginning of the game until the end. But we came out victorious. And on that conversion, it was just a great conversion." He was answering the question about the fourth down conversion. But, regardless, I think Lamar is correct. The Ravens have been held scoreless in 5 of their last 6 first quarters. And that is a very concerning stat when it comes down to it, because with regardless of how good or bad your offense is, you probably should be putting up at least 3 points in the first quarter, right? I think that's not too much to ask for, right? I don't think so. But the issue is, well, they're not putting up any points in the first quarter. They're not doing anything. So Lamar's correct, because against teams, look, the Chargers don't have the best offense in the world. The Steelers definitely do not. And a bunch of other teams, they've also not been wonderful about just getting it down correctly, because early in the season, Lamar's right, it was better. But 5 of the last 6 games going scoreless in the first quarter, You can't have that. So the offense got the job done, right? I'm not saying they didn't. I'm not saying they didn't play well on offense. I thought that Derrick Henry played really well. Lamar had his throws as well, and he didn't throw for 300 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he certainly did enough to win the game for sure. But when you look at the actual box score here, and the Chargers get out to an early 10-0 lead, it feels like the Ravens, there was that whole bogus narrative in the first place that Baltimore, if you get out in front of the Ravens, they can't come from behind, and Lamar can't come from behind. Never true in the first place, by the way. Never true in the first place. But it feels like they're doing that all the time now, doesn't it? Like, it feels like they've been chasing for a lot of the past 1 to 2, maybe even more months, where both games against Cincinnati, they were down. Steelers game, they were down. It always feels like they're chasing a team and not being out in front. Now, that's not the case every single game. I'm definitely not saying it's the case every single game, but it feels like that's happening too often for an offense that should be better in those instances. I'm really glad the Ravens have that sweet spot of like middle of the second quarter to end of the third quarter, sometimes into that fourth quarter when they're really down, trying to get things going. But still, you had plays in this game, especially early on, where Derrick Henry was getting going and then you took him off the field. And obviously, at the end of the day, like, he got enough carries and they rode him enough to the win where it was like, all right, that doesn't really matter because 1, they won, and 2, they used him enough. But it's moments like that. But I'm glad they were able to get the job done. I'm glad they were able to correct that. And I'm glad that Lamar is also acknowledging it, because I think that a lot of these things can kind of get swept under the rug in wins. And we've talked about this before. If you've been listening to me for an every day or on the show, or you've just been hearing my content or seeing my content around, is I talk about this a lot, where losses tend to, I guess the word I'll use is losses tend to almost like drum up issues and things that need to be fixed. It's like they put an emphasis on them. It's like, all right, man, we lost, and this is why, and let's fix it. Let's do this. Wins, it's like, oh, well, hey, we got the job done despite not doing this well, but we did enough other stuff well to win the game. But the problem with that mentality is that, well, the other stuff is still an issue. The other stuff, you still have problems. So I think that, again, they corrected some of the problems that we saw against Pittsburgh, particularly getting out of what they needed to do early on in that game and just execution stuff in general. I thought Lamar was much sharper. And even though he was selling some passes over some guys' heads, he had a couple of really, really, really good throws in this game, a couple of really, really, really nice plays in this game. And again, Lamar shouldn't have to be Superman. Part of the reason you bring in Derrick Henry, by the way, kind of like a mini side tangent that does have stuff to do with the conversation. Part of the reason you bring in Derrick Henry is so that Lamar doesn't have to put on that Superman cape every single game, try to go out there and take all that burden and win the game for you. It's nice every once in a while, I'm sure, for Lamar to maybe just hand that thing off to a guy like Derrick Henry and say, hey, can you go do this for me here for a game? Can you take this burden off of me? And he did that. Again, Lamar, he doesn't have to throw for that 305 touchdown stat line that I talked about. He's good enough, and this offense is good enough to where they can still put up 30. Lamar can throw for 177 and 2 touchdowns, and they can win the game. And they can put up all these points. Whereas other quarterbacks play that way. And since they're the lifeblood of their teams, much like Lamar Jackson is, it's difficult because a lot of those guys don't have a player like Derrick Henry to take that load off of them. We know Lamar can put on the Superman cape. We've seen him carry this team for season on top of season on top of season. But I think that this is going to help Lamar in the long haul. I think it's going to help Derrick Henry in the long haul too. It's going to help this entire offense. Now, the Ravens have about a month or so to get this thing fixed up before the playoffs start in terms of starting a little faster than they do, because I think it's just a lot easier than chasing the whole time. Now, in this experience of watching the Ravens chase, I feel a lot more confident in them doing so. Not that I didn't believe they could, not that they couldn't. Again, that was all fake news in the first place and false narratives. But, it felt like even when they were down 14 to Cincinnati, I wasn't necessarily discouraged and out of it like, oh, this game is done and the offense hasn't done anything all game. I still felt like they could do it. And again, it feels like this offense is very, I don't know if reactionary is the right word, but it just feels like they need to have some level of a spark to truly get going, like truly get in their rhythm. What was it? At the end of the game, they had scored on 5 or 6 straight possessions. Like it feels like they sleepwalked to the game They're going through the motions. First quarter ends, second quarter comes, or second half comes in some instances, and then all of a sudden it's this like big momentum shifting play. Marlon Humphrey interception, Marlon Humphrey fumble recovery, fourth down conversion. That's a big momentum play. And then all of a sudden it's like that one thing wakes them up and they're just a buzzsaw. They're just unstoppable. I just think they need to be able to, is self-motivate the right word? I don't know, but they need to be able to flip that switch a lot quicker. But they did it to an extent in this game where it was like they were knocking on the door, and then finally they broke through it with Derrick Henry kind of battering the door down. So I thought a lot of positive trends in this game offensively, particularly on third and fourth down. Over 50% on third down, 8 of 15, and of course, 3 for 3 on fourth down, which if you don't know is 100%. Just putting it out there. I know it's difficult math, but I'm just putting it out there. So I thought they did a bunch of really good things, but there's always room for improvement, of course. And I'm glad Lamar Jackson was quick to acknowledge it in his press conference, while also praising everything that happened in the game as well, because it's a game the offensive unit, the defensive unit, the team in general deserves to be praised for the performance. Was it a perfect win? No. But honestly, I don't really have that many complaints. The big one is them starting slow on offense, and then obviously penalties. We'll get to all that. I was decently content with how this game ended up going for the Ravens. Coming up in the second part of the show, Khalil Mack took some shots at Derrick Henry after the game, and they came out of nowhere. Stay tuned. We'll talk about what was said and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Skylight Frames. If you come from a big family like me, it can be hard and expensive to try to buy each one a personal gift for the holidays, each singular person, and even my friend group, right? I want to surprise them all with something a bit more special and meaningful than the usual this year. We've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. There's seamless sharing. You can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free Skylight mobile app or email, which no account or subscription is required for that. Also, there's a gift mode that makes it very meaningful. Personalized gifts for everyone. You can preload it with memories without opening the box. Surprise them with old sentimental photos as soon as it's plugged in. Plus, it's a top-rated brand, over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and available in over 30 countries, recommended by the Today Show, Forbes, New York Magazine, and so much more. And now it's a special limited time offer for our listeners. Get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/NFL. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. FanDuel has so much going on. Be sure to head over there and just visit FanDuel.com to join today to find out everything that they have. And look, for this Ravens and Chargers game that just happened, if you had more on the Derrick Henry rushing yards, you're probably living large over on FanDuel. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back for our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Victory Tuesday. Feels good to say that. Really appreciate everybody for being here again, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. As a reminder, we're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form on YouTube. We are so close to 10,000 subscribers, under 500 away. And once we hit 10,000, I will wear a Dixie Cup patterned outfit for a full week, which is what I promised the first day we started up in video form. And I still remember the first day we started up in audio form. That was before we did video, a couple of years before. And if you're an audio listener, really appreciate you as well. Be sure to hit that follow along and subscribe button. And that first episode I ever did was about Kari Vedvik. It's a throwback name, isn't it? Kari Vedvik. And then actually my second ever episode was about Jadeveon Clowney back in 2019. Is he going to come to Baltimore? And lo and behold, we get him 4 years later in Baltimore in 2023. So crazy how time works like that. It's been an awesome journey and looking forward to obviously continuing it on Locked On Ravens. But let's talk about these comments from Khalil Mack. I did not expect anything like this. There wasn't really any bad blood. I guess I forget the charge. It might have been T.R. Tart, stopped Derrick Henry, and I think taunted him and Henry kind of shoved him off or whatever. But I didn't really sense any bad blood between the two teams personally. I mean, there's a lot of former Ravens, a lot of guys who have good relationships with the team. At least I think so. Now, Khalil Mack, obviously not a part of that, at least the former Raven club. I think for a lot of people, they wanted him on the Ravens, but never ended up happening. Well, Khalil Mack, after the game, was pretty frustrated with the Chargers' performance on everything, especially with the way that they defended the run, which, long story short, little spoiler for the final part of the show when we do the recap, Ravens averaged 5.7 yards per carry, including Derrick Henry averaging 5.8 himself and Justice Hill averaging 13.8, including that big 51-yard touchdown. So not a great day for a bottom 10 ranked run defense, which not particularly surprising to me. It's been a weakness of the Chargers all season. But when you heard Khalil Mack after the game, he says, on playing against Derrick Henry, quote, "That's the thing, man. I don't think it's hard to play against that guy. And hopefully we see this team again. That's all." And then there's added context to it. He said, "The way I play football, I would love to play this team again. I would love to. It's not hard for me to play against that guy. I love playing against the greats, and this was no different. When I say hard, I mean in the sense of playing against him. If I'm on the field, I know he'd come to my side. I got him." Well, the context does matter, and I think that it's not like the full, like he's fully going on and like attacking Derrick Henry in that way. But to say it's not hard to play against him after he just ran for 140 yards on your football team, or at least I get the fact that at the end he said that, like, okay, if Derrick Henry's over on his side, all right, that's his responsibility, and he has him. And I know the Ravens ran to one side a lot in this game. It just felt like the Ravens were running all the way over, and it's like, okay, go. But it's a team game, first of all. And it's not like the Ravens were specifically avoiding Khalil Mack because he's such this great run defender. I thought Khalil Mack had a pretty good game, actually. I thought he contained Lamar well on a bunch of different plays. Didn't necessarily have anything in the sack department or like pressures. I thought the Ravens offensive line did a pretty good job. But I would understand this if it was after a win or if it was after a loss, but the Ravens struggled to run the ball. But I feel like these are more anger comments from Khalil Mack, where it's like he's frustrated that the Chargers couldn't stop him. I think he probably thought they had a good game plan to try to stop Derrick Henry and get him down on the ground to make sure he didn't impact the game the way that he did. But again, I'm going to say it again. I think it's so crazy that you're saying I don't think it's hard to play against that guy, and it's not hard for me to play against the guy. Look, playing against the greats, he loves playing against the greats. That's awesome. I mean, I think that every player should have that mindset of striving for greatness and best on best, going against the best. And yeah, that's a great mindset to have. But again, I think that the comments are, I don't know. It's something that I wouldn't necessarily have thought that a guy would say after allowing 140 yards to a guy as a team. But it could even be season-long frustration of not being able to stop running backs in general. I mean, if this had happened and a guy had gone for 140, but it wasn't Derrick Henry, like let's say it was Justice Hill, and I know like Justice has had a great season, and I'm super happy he's had the year he's had, but he's not Derrick Henry. Justice went for 140, and Khalil Mack says it's not hard to play against that guy. Hopefully we see the team again. I mean, okay, I guess. Still wouldn't love the comments, but I guess. But at the end of the day, I think that this, in a way, is him either calling out his defense, holding himself to a higher standard. Like, I understand that this is probably a motivation thing, right? But the Chargers' run defense was practically non-existent in this game. When you average almost 6 yards a game as a team, and a lot of that comes off of two guys. I mean, yes, the Ravens didn't have a lot of success running with Lamar Jackson in this game. Lamar didn't really do his thing, and he hasn't really been asked to for most of the season, if we're being honest. He did have the rushing touchdown, but Baltimore did score twice on the ground. And for Khalil Mack to have the game he had, which again was not bad. I didn't think Khalil Mack played bad. I just feel like it's more of a motivation thing for his team overall. I just think obviously if I'm the Ravens and, you know, I hear Khalil Mack saying it's not hard to play against a guy like Derrick Henry, and I hope we see that team again. There's a realistic shot that Baltimore and Los Angeles will match up in the playoffs with the Chargers as the 6th seed and the Ravens as the 3 seed. That's a realistic matchup. We talked about that on the live show last night / this morning, I guess, if you tuned in with us on Tuesday, where we talked about how I think the Ravens are going to win the AFC North now because they took advantage of the Pittsburgh game and the Pittsburgh loss they had to Cleveland, and that this is an AFC changing win for Baltimore, where I think that they are realistically going to be the 3 seed and the Chargers are probably going to be the 6 seed now. I think that that's going to maybe happen. It's very realistic. If I'm the Ravens and I see that, I'm putting that up on the bulletin board, whatever the context is. I mean, that's motivation. That's bulletin board material. Chargers gave up 212 yards on the ground. 212 yards. And you're saying stuff like that. I get it, but I don't. I get it, but I don't. That, to me, is like you had a couple good plays on Lamar Jackson. The team had a couple good plays on Lamar Jackson. The team stopped Derrick Henry at times. The Chargers had a couple of really good plays on Derrick Henry, right? There were some tackles for losses, stopping his momentum. I'm not saying that they never had success stopping him. But when a guy runs for 140 on you, a team runs for 210 plus on you, you can't make those comments. You can say, I hope we see that team again. Sure. I think that's leadership. I think that's expressing confidence. That's fine. But to say it's easy to play against a guy like Derrick Henry, it's not hard for you to play against a guy like Derrick Henry. That's what he said. Not hard to play against a guy like Derrick Henry. More of a personal thing for him. I'm sure he was upset at his performance, upset at how the game went. But, man, it's talking a little crazy. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll dive into a general Ravens and Chargers recap, talk about the stats, talk about the trends, and where the Ravens go from here. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitutional 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. They also have courses on the Great American Story and a lot more than that. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. We return our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking to you on this Victory Taco Tuesday. Appreciate everybody again for being here today. Hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. We bring you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Now, let's talk about this Ravens and Chargers game. Again, not too many complaints. Now, this Carl Sheffers crew was notoriously known for throwing very little penalty flags. Not having a lot of them. Kind of giving leeway, especially when it came to offensive penalties. That didn't happen. Of course, if you watched the game, you knew that. 16 total penalties in the game combined between the two teams. Baltimore, another 9 added to their total for 102 yards. And the Chargers, 7 for 62. And as always, some were penalties, some were not. Leg whip is the key phrase today. Leg whip. Patrick Ricard, natural body movement. His leg goes into Bud Dupree's quad area, and they penalize Baltimore 15 yards, negates a huge Nelson Aguilar catch. Did we not see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah jump kick Lamar Jackson, and there was no leg whip penalty called on that, and Koramoah was celebrating with the kicking emoji. He was doing, oh, look at me, I just kicked the guy. I didn't get called for it. But Ricard falls forward, natural body movement, doesn't even impact the play really, and he gets called for it. I mean, come on, what are we doing here? Yes, there were penalties that mattered, and yes, there were penalties that were actual penalties on the Ravens. It's stuff they have to clean up. Again, it's inexcusable to have nearly double-digit penalties in every single game, essentially. And I don't have the exact updated penalty stats in front of me right now, but that's something you cannot have. So penalties and slow start offensively, and honestly defensively too. They got walked down the field in that first possession. But I want to talk about defense quickly because we've talked about Lamar, talked about Derrick Henry. We'll get into the receivers a little later. Defensively, no Roquan Smith. We talked a lot about the linebacker by committee approach they're going to have to use without Roquan. And, a lot of people, myself included, expressed some concern about guys like Malik Harrison, Chris Board, Kristen Welsh. Could they hold up? Malik had a pretty rough first drive, pretty rough couple of first moments. But let me tell you, after The game ended. He was the best player that played in that game on defense. And I give him all the props in the world. It was tough. He did miss plays early on in the game, right? We can criticize him and say, yes, that happened. But you can tell that meant so much to him after the game. He was talking about how he heard the doubters. He prepared so hard this week to try to get ready for the game. And he asserted his physicality. He played really well. I thought that as the game went on, it slowed down for him a little bit. Still some, poor plays at times, but I mean, nobody's going to be perfect, and Malik certainly wasn't, but I thought that it was such an almost inspiring bounce back from him after the start that he had to the game. And Chris Board also stepped up to the plate. Like, Chris Board was awesome. Malik Harrison finished the game with 13 total tackles. Chris Board had 4, but it just felt like the defense was flying around. It felt like, this is a very physical defense already, and Roquan obviously is a big part of that, but it felt like the linebackers were embodying Roquan on the field. And they're all their own players. I'm not saying, they got to be Roquan to be good. No, they're all their own guys. But Roquan brings a certain level of physicality to the field, and he wasn't there. And I thought Malik Harrison, Chris Board, and company did a really good job of replicating that on the field. I thought Nate Wiggins played really good football. Justin Herbert couldn't hit a deep ball for his life. And by the way, if Lamar Jackson was throwing like that and missing those deep balls the way that Herbert was, he'd be sent into the next realm with criticism from media. But just by the way, so I want to see if we get that same energy for Justin Herbert. Spoiler alert, we're probably not. But then you also have guys like Adarius Washington, I thought played well. Trey White had more moments in this game, which was really encouraging. But that Ravens defensive front was just all over the Los Angeles offensive line. The Los Angeles offensive line was in shambles trying to defend this group. Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, Rafe Owe, Kyle Van Noy. Seemed like Van Noy and Owe were getting held on almost every single play. Not a lot of them were getting called, by the way, which obviously with the way the game went, flag-wise, is a little surprising. But honestly, it's not, because it always happens with the Ravens, it feels like. But even Brent Urban was getting pressure. Everybody was getting pressure. And I thought that it was a really, really good game for the Ravens defensive front, because it felt like they always were getting pressure on Justin Herbert. Now, I thought Justin handled the pressure pretty well. They sent guys on corner blitzes, Nate Wiggins, Brandon Stevens, and, felt like Herbert felt the pressure, stepped up in the pocket, and made some really good throws and really good decisions in this game while doing that. But Chargers' offensive line couldn't even handle the Ravens' defensive front. And that's with 2 really good guys at tackle, and Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. Now, the interior of that line is not great. Bradley Bozeman's had a pretty up and down year, and it's been mostly down. Zion Johnson's not very good for a first rounder, and Trey Pipkins isn't very good either. So, again, you did what you were supposed to do against the interior of that line, and on the exterior, man, those guys put on a show. And speaking of offensive line, I thought Baltimore's offensive line played really well on Monday night. I thought protecting Lamar Jackson, he only took 1 sack, and that was from Derwin James, which, wasn't really a sack play. It was kind of Lamar getting tackled behind the line of scrimmage. But Lamar, obviously, there's always going to be that Lamar tax for the offensive line yes, Lamar evaded some sacks himself. That's always what happens. But I thought for the most part, didn't really feel like Lamar was pressured. And obviously they were opening up holes in the run game left and right for Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and others. So some team stats here, as I mentioned, Baltimore goes 3 of 3 on 4th down. And by the way, I said this on a live show. I was not surprised John Harbaugh went for it on 4th down from his own 16. I said it. Are we watching the same coach here? If you were surprised, I get if you were. I understand it. Like, I'm not saying that you were wrong for being surprised. But, this is a guy, and he said it on his halftime interview before coming out of the halftime locker room. He was like, how far back were we exactly? I just felt like we could get it. It doesn't matter for him. Like, if he feels like it's an opportunity to go pick a first down and get momentum, he's going to do it. This is a very aggressive football coach. This is a very aggressive football team. And so to me, that's why it was not surprising. The Ravens had 100 more total yards than the Chargers did, averaged almost 2 more yards per play than the Chargers did, almost 3 more yards per pass than the Chargers did, 2 for 2 in the red zone for both teams, and the Ravens held the ball more than the Greg Roman-led offense. The vault is officially closed. We can close the door on the vault. Greg Roman and that team get sent home, and the Ravens come out victorious. So I thought it was a very solid game overall for the Ravens, a big bounce back win, and they needed this one, especially going into a big Week 13 game against Philadelphia. And then it's the bye week. If you can head into your bye week off of 2 huge wins against Los Angeles and against Philly, man, that would be unbelievable. It'd be best case scenario. I know a lot of people who were sitting there saying this team was going to be 0-3 in their last 3 heading into the bye week between Pittsburgh, Los Angeles, and Philly. So you go out there, you take that momentum into the bye week, you come out against the Giants, who are starting who knows who. By the way, speaking of Giants, I would not be shocked if Daniel Jones becomes a Raven today or maybe this week. And if that happens, we're going to be talking about it live here on Locked On Ravens, so be sure to turn notifications on. But you get that momentum, and a whole lot can change. And we talked about it on the live show. If you want a more in-depth conversation about how this win changes the AFC landscape, be sure to check out that live show that we did after the game immediately on Monday night. But I think it really does. I think this puts Baltimore in a really, really, really good spot. Massive win. Honestly, I'm going to call this the biggest win of their season. Biggest win of the season for the Ravens. No complaints. Well, a couple, but not a lot of complaints for me from this Ravens team. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning in to the show today. Of course, we'll be back here tomorrow talking more Ravens football. So on the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form as well for 5 days a week plus more of Daily Ravens coverage. Tell a friend, tell a family member, word of mouth. Still very valuable, obviously. Wrote the show on social media, does wonders, but word of mouth still very much in. So stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.